This program is proudly brought to you by LateNightMedia.com for all your podcasting, comedy writing, and hot steaming pod needs. LateNightMedia.com.
Conscious wisdom, challenging our skeptical, critical thinking, digging deep into the dark and the light, and exploring the depths of our mind, body, and spirit. The podcast sprinkled with science, creativity, ageless wisdom, philosophy, and conspiracy. So be part of the discussion and get involved. Be part of the action of thinking and being the revolution. Be conscious with wisdom. Conscious wisdom, challenging our skeptical, critical thinking.
Well, they did an experiment, and you can go and check this out on the web, where they linked up a couple of electrodes to a plant. So they put one on the root and then one on the leaf, so they get the full electricity transfer like a battery. And then what they've done is they've hooked it up to kind of like a synthesizer that's also on another, like a translator. So what it does, it translates that energy into tones for the synthesizer to then play music. And they thought, well, what we'll do is we'll just hook it up, see what happens. And what happens is it just starts playing music, but it's not something that's disjointed, like as if you looked up a computer and did like a random noise generator. It actually flows like music, it's very spaced out. But what you do is if you interact with the plant at the same time, it would change, or it would almost as if talk to you. And this is a scientific thing. You can go and check it out on the web. I'll see if I can find it and then post it for people, so you can check it out. But it is this energy transfer. This plant's giving off an energy, and we're now translating it into resonance because it's giving out a vibration. I find it fascinating.
I think from there, and the others can sort of elaborate on this, there's some beautiful YouTube videos around of sand or loose material on a speaker, and the pitch varies and changes, and the material, which I think is generally sand, isn't it? Or it can be very different.
They generally use sand, yeah.
And it will change into shapes that are very
sacred geometry.
It is sacred geometry,
geometry. And I think until you witness that, you're seeing sound and sort of visual combination of what it and how it can affect change.
It's fantastic. It's called cymatics.
That's it.
And with cymatics, what I find also quite ingenious about it all is they go through, if you hit one of the tones, that's obviously, I think what they try and do is they try and hit those chakra tones that we were talking about before. You'll get this pattern that just stays, it's static. So it'll give you a form, and you can go through all the different forms by changing the tones. What they do is if you slightly change the tone up a little bit more, it starts moving. And what it does is it starts this whole kind of strange like pattern where it keeps sort of morphing around and as if giving more complexity to that original diagram. And what they've also done is in tests where they levitate objects, they pass tones through certain objects and it levitates them. And what they found also is if you hit that tone right of that object, it'll stay static. But if you slightly skew it, it starts spinning. It'll still levitate, but it'll add this rotation to it. So I find that fascinating within this whole field, because both of those obviously are doing the same kind of thing. It's when sound is interacting with matter.
That sort of comes into quite interesting topics of moving rocks with vibrational or sound or frequencies, and going to the monks who used horns, that, so they say, on certain points and certain geometric positioning that would move giant mega, what are they called? Megaliths?
Megaliths, yeah. Megalith stones, yeah.
And even
stones.
It sort of poses questions about how the Egyptians moved these rocks. And of course there's like 500 to 1,000 ton rocks on top of each other. And
Well,
vibrational
it's probably true, because I know when the neighbours used to play some really death metal at a low frequency,
That would
it
just
used to
move him.
me at 1 o'clock in the morning.
No, out of the neighbourhood. Now, actually, I've just pulled up some information on a guy named Edward Leith Scallan. Now, Edward Leith Scallan has a place called the Coral Castle.
Yes, I was
Yeah.
just trying to think
Yeah.
of
Was
that.
this okay?
Yeah.
Awesome. We're syncing right now.
Yeah.
And
I think we are.
Vibration, you're
cool.
connected.
I
Definitely
like
resonance,
I like
yeah.
the pun that was generated there from our sync.
Thinking about.
Now we've gone German, which I also like. We can all hug. Now, the Coral Castle was built by one man, supposedly. And
Yeah.
what he did was he didn't let anyone see what he was doing. And he just created this backyard worth of all these massive coral stones. But he wouldn't let anyone see him transport it. Now, the cool thing was there was a couple of kids who were reported of seeing him do stuff. And what they said was that he had like ice cream cones in his hand, that they said, while these big stones were just like levitating off a truck. And what another guy has done is he's done a lot of research. Now, he's one of the guys who runs a thing called the Ubuntu Liberation Movement.
Michael Tellinger.
Michael Tellinger, great man. And what he's done is he's done some research into both the Coral Castle sort of cases and these cones. And the cones are all throughout history, where you look at these cones and they're like celebrated objects, as if they had like a major purpose. And normally, if you look, I think, past your standard religious icons, they, instead of more religious icons, they had purpose. So he thinks that these cones help them move it. So what do you guys reckon about that?
Yeah, he came and spoke. Did you go? You were there, weren't you, Leith?
Yeah.
You were
Yeah,
there.
I went, yeah.
Greg, wasn't that something that he got caught on an aeroplane with as well, and it shut down the whole electronics, and
Yeah.
he had to open his bag and show
I
it?
just have these ice cream cones in here. Nothing to see.
But
Yeah.
he also talked about the rocks being sort of hollow, as though sound or information was put into these rocks. So, and he even went on to explain that, some guy from the some kid from the 21st century would plug his iPad in and get all this information that was put into these rocks, or these blocks.
All those rock formations that are found throughout Africa, they're not crop circles, but when you pan back and look at them from a Google Earth kind of point of view, they look like the grid on a computer.
Oh,
And-
really? So
yeah.
they're like
They're microchip.
computer
Yeah.
schematics.
Yeah. So,
Huh.
and that was all to do with frequency and sound. And
So let's get back to the cones and the Coral Castle. Now, when we're talking about before, we had like there's scientific experiences where they levitate. It's nothing big. They levitate styrofoam balls by passing the frequency. So when we look at this sort of technology, it seems like they've got these cones and they pass a resonance or a tone, and they've got poles. So obviously, like something with a pole, because you need two. Would that seem the case to you guys? Like,
As a negative and positive.
does music have a negative and a positive?
It's an interesting question.
because if it's like a resonant tone, obviously you have a high end and a low end. So is it something that you guys have experienced, like a music having poles?
What I will say is, before the word intention came to mind, when I teach songwriting, we talk about artistic intention. And what's the reason why you wrote the song? And that's important as a concept of prosody as well, where it's an ancient Greek philosophical term that means in a great work of art, everything in the song supports the central message, and there's nothing extraneous to that. And when there's all that unity there, that shared intention is, I think, what moved the guy in the alleyway. It's the singer-songwriter is sharing that intention, and that's coming up. The vibrations kind of order themselves with that intention. So that unity, I think, is the polarity disappears, and it disappears into the one central field. So there's no longer duality of negative and positive. It all just merges. So that's
Okay, that's interesting.
The
an
power
idea.
of the power of intention that you're touching on, Nathan. That's it's really vital in the work that I do with sound sound healing. It's the power of intention has a certain frequency or vibration. It also carries through with thought as well. Has a vibration as well. The power of thought, and really, if you look at what we are made up of is atoms, which is vibrating electrons. Are all vibrating. So when you play sound, or when you and as you said, that the guy was sort of in the alley and sort of sat down. It goes through the whole body. It's not just through the ears. The ears are a central processing unit, but we hear, but not just with our ears, but with our whole body, and every cell in our body picks up on it. And that's why people say sound body or, sound mind. But yeah, I mean, sound is just permeates through you and makes you feel certain emotions, and even emotions of vibrational energy systems.
And how do you think sound and light, or sound and colour, how colour has different frequencies? Do you think that there's a correlation there with sound, like physical sound and sight and colour? I haven't personally explored it, but I know there is. I don't know if anyone here has explored that. I know people like Rudolf Steiner have written about sound and light and colour, and how those frequencies are sort of matched. I know sound in terms of pitch in relation to chakras, like we were talking about, has been known from Egyptian times, where I do believe in Egypt times they would have something like, and they weren't probably called chakras in the Indian context, but if there were seven chakras, and the eighth is the higher pitch, although we're talking octave in that term, anyone out there musically would know that's a diatonic scale, but a chromatic scale would be 12 variations of frequency, and the 13th is the next octave in the true sense, isn't it, in the chromatic terms. And so the Egyptians saw it as 12 chakras, 13th being the Godhead, which was the next
octave.
Yeah, the next octave up, and so it would go up like that. Do you think there's any interaction with that? Do you think that's... Anyone want to expand on that thought?
I think if you measure sound that we hear, that our ears pick up vibrations from 20 hertz, it's 20 cycles per second, right up to around 20,000 hertz or kilohertz.
Yep.
And then above that is ultrasound, and then you get up into thousands, and then millions, and then billions, and that's when we get up into light spectrums.
Yep.
So it's all just vibrations. And it stands to reason that the octaves, musically speaking, just keep going up, even if they go above the range of hearing. They're still repeating octaves of these musical tones.
So in the Western world, because we have that chromatic sort of 12 notes, but in Arabic and Indian and Chinese, they have a very different... It's obviously they have the same frequencies than us in the West, but why does it sound different? Like they have a different sort of scale, if you like, or a different...
Well, different systems, because one of the introductory chapters in the songwriting course I teach, we talk about the harmonic series. And if you play a fundamental tone, let's say we play A440, there's a whole series of harmonics that go above that tone. They get gradually softer as they go up, but they're all built into that system. And there's different relationships of the notes. And within the first 5 harmonics, there's actually a major chord, what we hear as a major chord. And that's why that sounds so sonorous to us. When you play a major chord, it feels happy and true and right, because it's actually in nature.